NFL draft. What is that, John? 6 weeks away now? 6 weeks away? 7 weeks away?
Well, getting close.
Yeah,
everything's getting close.
No doubt. It's coming right up. And to do that, we got Ian Cummings here today, set to join us on Birds 365, one of the very best at covering the draft. If you've been listening to Birds 365 for multiple years, you've heard a lot of Ian Cummings on our show at draft season. He does it better than anybody else. He joins us right now here on Birds 365. You can follow him on X at IC_draft. Ian, good to see you, my friend. Happy 2026. Welcome back to Birds 365. How you doing today, my man?
Doing good. It's good to talk with you guys again. Anytime I'm talking with you, I know that we're on the ramp up to the NFL draft. Still free agency to go, but the combine just passed and a lot of new information there. So always fun to chop it up and ready to get going.
Yeah, happy draft season. Good to see you, Ian. I guess we'll start with the combine. I mean, I going into the combine, I got the feel texting people around the league. This draft isn't that great at the top, and all of a sudden you get to Indy, and I think this happens every year.
Yeah,
this might be the most athletic class of all time. I mean, it's just athletes off the board everywhere. And now you come out of Indy and there's like 50 first-round picks. This guy's a first-round pick. This guy's a first-round pick. So we'll start there. Where's your feel about this draft as a whole? How good it is, how deep it is, the positions that are deep, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think my outlook for the class didn't change too much at the NFL Combine. I think one thing that people have been making note of, and I think it's an important observation and delineation to make, is that less of the players who aren't expected to test well are testing, right? You're seeing more of the players who are expected to run a 4.40, right? Or expected to jump at least 35 inches in the vertical, right? Like there's a little bit of selection bias going on where we aren't seeing as many players test at the NFL Combine if they don't have as much to gain as they have to lose, and they can just log a better time at their pro day too. So there's a little bit of selection bias, fewer volume, but the guys that we did see this year, right, the times were off the hook, especially for some positions like corner and safety and wide receiver. Linebacker was incredibly fast too. But I think what that is more representative of is the fact that because a lot of the top players didn't test either, right? Guys who, again, didn't have as much to gain if you're near the top of the board and you can run a faster time at your pro day. What I think the combine best exemplifies this year is that, and it's kind of what the conclusion that I came to before in the all-star cycle around then, this class is kind of shaped like a bell curve, right? You don't have a ton of bona fide blue chip talent at the top of the board, and you don't have a ton of bona fide first round talent either. Every time I do a mock draft, I get to around 24, 25, and you're having to reach into that slightly, round 2 graded pool a little bit to get some guys to fill that out. That said, I think this class is really, really deep in the middle round range. I think from round 2 even to middle round 4 and maybe even early round 5, I do think you can find starting talent in this class. It's a really, really, kind of thick class in the middle as far as that's concerned. And I think for a lot of NFL teams, that's going to be a good thing because I think you can find genuine starting talent in that range. But as far as guaranteed impact players early on in their careers, not quite as many of those. Or if there are they have questions. Like with Arvell Reese, it's the positional designation. It's going to be an off-ball or edge. With Ruben Bain, it's the arm length, right? With David Bailey, it's the run defense and a little bit of stiffness in his hips, right? So you have question marks with all these guys that are, traditionally billed as these top flight, top 10 picks. But I also think this class compensates with just the sheer volume of middle round talent. I think there's going to be plenty of gems to take advantage of.
Ian, we're going to get into some individual players, obviously, but how do you think that bodes for, trading in within the draft? Howie Roseman's traded in the first round 4 of the last 5 drafts, either gone up or down. Seems to me, based on what you just said, that people might be trying to move down. I mean, especially where the Eagles are at that 23 spot. How do you see their value there at 23 and maybe what the Eagles could try and do at that spot?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely leaned more toward trading down. I think a lot of the pipe dreams that you'd have the Eagles potentially taking in the NFL draft, like some of these higher end corners, or maybe Kenyon Sadiq was mocked there sometimes. We know the long-term outlook with Dallas Goedert, he might come back for 2026, but not sure beyond that. But now you have Sadiq running a 4.39 and jumping what he did in the vertical, right? And showing off that speed and that athleticism, like probably not making it there, right? So yeah. I'd be willing to wager a lot of these guys, these blue chip or near blue chip talents are getting pushed up the board. Maybe for the Eagles, you do have a player who fits your value proposition, right? I know offensive line could be an area for them to target too, but guys like Monroe Freeling probably moving up the board, right? You could get Caden Proctor, Blake Miller, but again, it depends on the valuation. So I would definitely lean toward the Eagles trading a little bit down, right? I think they're well outside the blue chip threshold. That said, if a first round talent does fall to them, I can see them taking it. Or if a player is falling into the mid-teens, maybe make an aggressive move up. But I think the Eagles have enough needs where you want to play the value of the board. We know Howie Roseman has always been good at that. I think this class in particular, if you aren't sold on a guy in round 1 range, again, there are going to be a lot of opportunities to get potential role players or really quality gems in the middle rounds. So if you can get more dart throws in that range, I think that will behoove you more. So I would lean trading down. I think opportunity might be there to trade up, but there's less volume to trade up for. And there will be teams who will be aggressive if certain prospects fall.
All right, I'm going to be a top grader here, and I want Ian Cummings' thought. I got 2 blue chip players, and one of them's a running back. Which I don't like to do, but I am in love with Jeremiah Love as a prospect. I think he's just phenomenal. And then the other one I have, and now I hear there's some medical concerns, and that's Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. So that's it for me. Those are the 2 best players in the draft. Who are the best players in the draft according to Ian Cummings?
Caleb Downs is definitely up there. And I think as far as the medicals are concerned, it's different for every team. Corey Kinnan had a great report come from the combine citing that, he was flagged with a partially torn meniscus and a potentially degenerative ACL, right? Now there's a clarification that needs to be made with any medical check. It doesn't proliferate what happens in the pros, right? Like you can have a flagged medical evaluation, but then go on to have a healthy career. You can have a spotless medical check and go on to get really bad injury luck in the pros. So, there is a level of entropy that comes with it. I do think though with Caleb Downs, it's worth noting for a few separate factors, right? One, the positional value of the safety position, right? Time and time again, we see these safeties who are billed as can't miss prospects and they fall down the board because teams just don't value that position quite as much. Do I agree with that assessment? Not particularly. I think having a safety blanket on the back end like Caleb Downs, who can play split field to single high in the box as a rover, even some big nickel reps against tight ends, I think having that kind of chess piece can be extremely valuable, right? But teams just don't share that sentiment, it seems, with their actions, right? Kyle Hamilton obviously fell to the teens when he was viewed as a blue chip prospect. So, and then you throw in the fact that Caleb Downs is around average size. He's probably not going to test as an elite athlete at the pro day. I think he's got very good with coverage mobility, but not quite the size speed freak that we've seen elevated when it is the safety going pretty early. And then on top of that, the medical red flags, or not red flags, but the medical question mark, I'll say, into that factor too. You could see him potentially, and then also another one, Dylan Finneman from Oregon, testing the way that he did at the NFL Combine. That's safety too. That's another first round prospect. There's an outcome where Finneman goes above Downs if teams are scared enough of the medical issue. Film wise, I agree with you. He's a top 2 prospect in the class. His football IQ is through the roof. I think he has the functional coverage mobility. He's got the targeted physicality and run defense. And when opportunities come his way, he can make plays at the catch point. But there are a lot of elements of uncertainty clouding over his profile. Jeremiah Love is up there for me. He's a top 10 prospect on my board, 6 foot, over 210, running the way that he did. It was just a verification of what we've seen on the film, right? Elite explosion, elite long speed, but also he sizes up really well with physicality. I think he's very good at playing with tenacity in contact situations, driving forward through defenders. And then at the end of the day too, he's very proficient at creating space and capitalizing behind the line of scrimmage, right? My favorite, the way that I word it, he's a really proficient toggle and throttle runner, right? Where he can toggle a little bit behind the line of scrimmage to press linebackers outside of gaps and then just divert upfield and capitalize. And he's got that game breaking speed where if you give him an angle, he's going to just obliterate your tackling angle, your pursuit angle, and he's going to get upfield. And then he's got the agility, the creative ability too. So he actually has a higher grade on my board than Ashton Jeanty did have last cycle. So it's a representation of how good he is. That said, there is one more prospect in the top 3 blue chip range for me, and that's Sonny Styles, linebacker out of Ohio State. And the way that he tested is, again, verification of he's the real deal physically and mentally. 6'5", 244, near 33-inch arms, running a 4.46, 43.5-inch vertical, which is certifiably insane. And it's unbelievable, man. And the worst metric was like an over 7.3 cone, which was still in the 70th percentile, right? So he's a freakish athlete. a former safety, and it shows on the film. But also, I think his mental game is just as strong as his physical game, which is scary. I mean, he's an elite processor. He's so good at reading gaps and, you know, staying square to his assignments. And then he's got the size and the strength and the power and the explosion to really just, you know, launch into contact, fully stack and shed, make tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He's got depth discipline, as you would expect from a former safety, in coverage. And then he had 6 sacks in 2024, rushing the passer as a blitzer. He's got really good efficiency in that phase too. So I know off-ball linebacker, like safety, is another position that gets hit with the, you know, positional value designation. What do we do with this? But when a player is as dynamic, as versatile, and just as good straight up as Sonny Styles, it's really difficult to pass on them in that range. So, you know, looking at how well he checks the boxes, he's another one right up there.
Yeah. Well, all 3 guys are at positions: running back, safety, weak side linebacker, where generally, you know, they're not going to take you at the top of the draft. So we'll see how that affects the top. Obviously, we know Fernando Mendoza is going to go number 1 overall. After that, are there any quarterbacks worthy in your mind of going in the first round?
Right now, I would say no. But I think Ty Simpson has scarcity on his side. We see scarcity elevate QB prospects every single year, right? Jackson Dart, you can look at
JJ McCarthy, man.
JJ McCarthy, exactly, right? It's like, you know, and Kenny Pickett going back a few years, going for round 1 when a lot of people had day 2 grades at most. I had a day 2 grade on Dart. He's been really good early in his career, but again, there was a little bit of elevation factor there too. But yeah, scarcity is really powerful when it comes to QBs, because QBs, by and large, by far the most valuable position. I think there's a consensus agreement on that. If you don't have a QB, then you can't compete. Or, you know, we know that there have been some flashes in the pans. The Eagles with Nick Foles winning the Super Bowl, prime example, right? But even then,
you're going to get in trouble, Ian. But you're 100% correct. But here you're going to get in trouble.
Here's the thing, though. It's
correct.
It's possible, right? But is it the most sustainable method of success? No. By and large, you need a QB, right, who can elevate your team, at the very least keep you competitive. And I think Fernando Mendoza is that caliber of QB. He's not quite at the level of Drake May or Caleb Williams for me, but he would grade around the range that Jaden Daniels graded for me. So still a very, very good QB prospect, worthy of that franchise label. Ty Simpson, on the other hand, though, the next guy up, and his best film from 2025 was really good. You're looking at that midseason stretch games like LSU, where he was really in rhythm. He was showing good processing ability, anticipation over the middle. And I love how easily he retorques his hips. He's very mechanically sound when he's in rhythm, right? He can get that hip torque, that full velocity generation, can keep his shoulders level and hit guys over the middle. But down the stretch, and there's been some speculation that he was dealing with injuries too. His play was not quite as consistent. The word that always comes to mind for me, and this is not a word that you want to hear with a QB, because in the NFL, you're facing pressure on every single down, both ambient pressure, right, with the situation, but also direct pressure, guys rushing the A gap, the B gap, the C gap. So you can't be frenetic as a QB. And that's the word that always comes to mind with Ty Simpson. There's a lot of freneticism to his game where he's just a little too jittery, you know, a little too easily spooked off his spot, or, you know, out of sync, especially down the stretch this past year, right? At his best, you saw a little more composure, but for a guy who's frenetic he can be frenetic with his mechanics and his accuracy and situational precision, right? And even the processing, sometimes where he's spooked off his initial read, is a little late to recover as a result, missing progressions over the middle because of that. You can't be inconsistent on the operational side when you're not an elite physical talent, right? Ty Simpson, 6'1", 211 at the NFL Combine, not an elite athlete, a good creator, right? Has good arm talent, but is he elite in any of those categories? No, right? So I know people have been throwing around the top end comp of a Brock Purdy if he can get that operational consistency. My comp for him through the cycle has been Mark Bulger, going back to the Rams. You know, I think Mark Bulger was a little bit bigger, but you're looking at a guy, again, who was more reliant on mechanical congruence and processing, right? And at his best, accuracy when he was in rhythm, but didn't quite have that level of physical talent to elevate the Rams and get them to Super Bowl contention consistently, right? So I still think Ty Simpson, top 50 player, but is he a first rounder for me? No, but I also understand scarcity is a really powerful elevating factor. And then going
real quick to your scarcity point, because I want to take it to the Eagles. And I want to bring it up to Garrett. I want to get your thoughts on Garrett Nussmeier, because we don't have scarcity. You got to see the warts. He played a lot at LSU. I know the Eagles have had interest in him for a long time. When Doug Nussmeier was here, they got to know him very well, sort of a friend of the program. Where are you after the poor season And obviously we were talking about him as a potential top 15 pick at one point. Now he's kind of off the radar. What do you think him as a prospect? Because I think, the Eagles have a history of taking quarterbacks when you might not expect it, and he might be a day 2 guy for them.
For sure. And just like scarcity can elevate a day 2 guy into day 1, it can elevate a day 3 into day 2, right? So it kind of goes down the board. Garrett Nussmeier, and we're talking about scarcity a lot, so let me go all the way back to the summer of 2025, right? When we didn't know who was going to be the QB1 of the 2026 class, and you see everyone rolling out their way too early mock drafts, right? I do think scarcity may have played a hand in elevating his preseason profile a little bit. He had a day 2 grade for me, a mid to late day 2 at best coming into the cycle. So I never really saw him as that top 15 prospect bona fide. And a big reason for that, the talent profile, right? I just don't think he quite has the high, not a prototypical QB, right? And I do think the arm strength when he's healthy is above average. Is it elite? No. And then he's not really a high-end athlete either. There's kind of the craftiness of a Tony Romo or Andy Dalton at his peak, but again, not a guy who's going to consistently stress defenses with his physical tools. And then you look at the operational inconsistency that followed in 2025. There were times when, I think as a processor, he's elite. He's one of the best processors in the class, and you can really tell that he is an offensive coordinator's son with the way that he can operate and dictate the offense pre-snap, right? Undress defensive looks, get players in position, things like that, read coverages and spacing as well pre-snap to identify opportunities. But post-snap, there's just too many head-scratching decisions, right? Where sometimes he'll have good field vision, but he'll miss a linebacker undercutting a second-level window, right? And just throw an interception, or he'll have lapses in situational precision, again, making receivers work harder than they should for balls. Now, there's a very important caveat. Garrett Nussmeier was dealing with an oblique injury through most of the 2025 season, and that severely affects your velocity, your throwing motion, and your comfort, right? So I understand why there was that downturn, right? And I'm definitely, and looking at the Senior Bowl, he played very well at the Senior Bowl. I think he progressed through the week, and on day 3 in particular, day 3 of practices, through the 2-minute drill, you saw him again doing what he does best, commanding the offense, keeping them on schedule, making quick, decisive reads, and throwing with accuracy and velocity when he's healthy, right? So I think going back to the film is going to be really challenging, right? Because 2025, he was not at his best, clearly. I think at his best, you could rationalize him being a day 2 pick for sure. And I think in the right situation, he could be a really solid spot starter. Again, my high-end comp is Andy Dalton. I think at his best, he can be a solid year-over-year starter for you. But eventually, you're going to find that he's not going to elevate your team, and you're going to look elsewhere for that next level, right? So a really interesting evaluation. I think he wins in a lot of ways that are translatable when he's at his best, with cerebral play style, processing, and accuracy when he's comfortable and not below 100%. But you also have that middling physical talent profile that's really tough to get away from, right? So you got to be tempered with your expectations and with your valuation, but especially, like you said, in this class, scarcity, right? That's a really big factor. And he's got the pedigree coaching background with his father. He's got the experience. He's got the processing ability. And I think he has okay baseline talent. Again, far from elite, right? Closer to average than elite. But all it takes is one team to get won over by the mental makeup and kind of, believe that he's above average in that talent threshold, and that alone can get him in a day 2 range. So I'd say, still a mid to late day 2, early day 3 guy for me. But if there's anyone who can elevate into day 2, it's him because of those underlying factors.
Great breakdown there for me and Cummings on the quarterbacks. Ian, let's go to the Eagles, man. Big talk right now in Philadelphia is replacing future Hall of Fame tackle Lane Johnson. Now, Lane's going to return this year, but walk me through the tackles in this draft. Who do you like? Who do you think could be there at 23 if the Eagles did stay put, and maybe even a round 2 or a round 3 value? What do you make of the tackle position coming into the 2026 NFL draft?
Yeah, it's a really interesting group because I think a lot of the tackles are guys that we're looking at as potential tackle to guard converts, right? There aren't a lot of pure tackles that are going to garner early starting appeal in the NFL, right? But the class is very deep as far as interior line converts go. But if you're the Eagles, and I think the combine, in a sense, it might have helped. It might have not, because Monroe Freeling for Georgia tested extremely well. 6'7", I think 315, over 34-inch arms, ran a 4.91 40-yard dash, had a low 1.7 10-yard split. Just absolutely insane explosion in athleticism numbers. And then you turn on the tape, and he's got the flexibility. He's got the power profile, the angle IQ, and the run game too. A little rudimentary in pass protection. But the point being, Monroe Freeling will probably not be there anymore. I think Caleb Lomu has a good chance of being off the board before the Eagles pick. I have mocked him to the Eagles before, but he tested very well. And combining that with Spencer Fano's arm length being 32 and 1/8 inches, that might flip those guys, right? So maybe you see Fano fall down the board a little bit, but that puts Spencer Fano in the conversation potentially. Right now, we know the Eagles have traditionally preferred length, right, and mass at the tackle position, and Spencer Fano might fall below their thresholds, being 6'5.5", 311, only 32-inch arms. But athletically, this guy is one of the best in the class. And I think in particular, too, a lot of the soft skills that you need to succeed at offensive line are there with him. You look at balance, you look at knee bend, hip flexibility, both to, transition laterally, but then also to siphon hand power from your hip transitions. I think Spencer Fano is very proficient in that area. So if the Eagles go beyond their thresholds, right, Spencer Fano could be an option late in round one. I think that, the measurements could kick him down a little bit, but again, he's got that lateral mobility. I think he has the athleticism. I think he has the upper lower synergy, all of those things to compensate for that lacking arm length profile. Now, if they want to go with pure measurables, Caden Proctor is also here, and he's a mountain of a man. I think he measured in still over 350 pounds after trimming down for the combine, which is just certifiably insane. Again, the proportional length is not elite. It's around 33.5, I believe. And also he's a little stiff as an athlete. I've always viewed him as probably a likely convert inside to guard long-term, but I will concede later in the year, he started to kind of take a trend upward with his technique and operational utility a little bit more, right? And you're still working with a guy who, for his size, has really good knee bend, really good leverage acquisition. The anchor strength can be suffocating when he gets his hands on you. And I do think he's a very, very good an asset in the run game where he can move guys off the line and get really easy displacement energy too. So Caden Proctor is right there too. But Blake Miller, I'd say from Clemson, is another
yes,
really compelling
that's who I was
player.
going to ask you.
He's got the length, he's got the height, the lean mass, and again, the athleticism just pops, man. He tested exactly the way you expected him to. Mid-30s vertical, just over a 5 in the 40, but a really good 10-yard split too. And on film, man, I mean, he was. You're looking at a guy who started, I think, 54 games in his collegiate career. He was a 4-year starter. So that kind of dependability is really valuable. And I think the earlier years of his career were a little rocky, but 2025 was his best season. And you saw a guy who really improved his again, leverage acquisition. I think for his size, his really good knee bend, gets that pad level attuned really well for his size. And then his anchor strength was probably my biggest concern entering 2025. I do still think there are lapses with his anchor where he can do a little bit better job fully swiveling and absorbing power outputs, but I do think he improved there. He's got really good upper lower synergy. He flashes really good hand usage. And in the run game, he is one of the rangiest blockers in the class that you'll see. I mean, just time and time again, he's pulling from the C gap to the opposite C gap and reaching his landmark in a timely manner. He's climbing to the second level and reaching his landmarks and just driving through linebackers too. So, a really fun physical talent who also has the experience and the baseline level of operational utility in both phases that you want. So I like Blake Miller a lot. I believe he's just outside my top 32. So a really good player and a guy that I like a lot. One more player that I'll bring up in this offensive tackle breakdown is Max Ihanashor from Arizona State.
I'm glad you brought him up because I wanted to know how to pronounce his name. Say it one more time, Ian.
Max Ihanashor. Yep.
Nice.
So he's originally from Nigeria. He didn't play high school football at all. He played basketball and soccer, I believe, and then went the JUCO route, obviously not having that football experience, but, came to Arizona State and immediately started to get into the starting rotation. And this past year, he put up one of the best performances against that Texas Tech duo, Romello Height and David Bailey, right? With Ihanashor, you're looking at a guy who is probably going to be an older rookie. He might be as old as 24, 25, right? So there aren't a lot of definitive age valuations out there. So if the Eagles have a strict age threshold, that's where they might prefer a younger player like a Fano if he falls, or Miller probably being a little bit younger, right? But I think Ihanashor, if you're willing to work with, again, it's not a good combination to be an older prospect, but also have a relative lack of experience at the tackle position because you have a shorter runway, right? He's going to be 30 a little bit quicker. And there's still some work to do with the stunt vision and the processing of, ancillary peripheral threats, right? So I think if he's one-on-one on an island, I do think he has the matching ability. The athleticism pops with this guy, and he's got almost 34-inch arms, over 320 pounds, really big dude who carries the weight well. At the Senior Bowl, that was something that popped right away in one-on-ones. Just he moves very well laterally. That can be to his detriment sometimes where he'll overset a little bit and give an inside counter lane. But again, at the Senior Bowl, I think you saw his propensity for fast learning, because his first day was a little rough, and you'd heard people talking about, hey, look at this guy Maxi Honichor, don't look away from him because he might be a first round riser after the Senior Bowl. After the first day, people were kind of iffy on that. Like, oh, he was a little inconsistent, but he came back on day 2 and day 3 and just built every single day. And by day 3, he was one of the best offensive linemen there. He was, giving a lot better precision and timing with his strikes. He was being patient with his redirections and his angle positioning. And he was just suffocating, just latching and just erasing any power when he got his hands on guys. So the power profile, the size, the athleticism, all of those things are there with him. And I also think he grew as a run blocker this past year, showing off better ability to get in space and fully drive through space defenders too. So he's trending up. The runway is a little bit shorter with him, and he's a little bit raw in terms of processing stunts, right? I think his angle IQ is really good in the run game, but in the NFL, diverse stunt looks, guys coming from the second level, slanting rushes from the interior positions. Like, you need to be aware of all those different things. And I think he's a little bit more raw there than some of the other guys like Blake Miller or the Utah duo. But if you're willing to go through that 1 to 2 year runway, kind of getting more reps against those different types of looks, he's got the athleticism, he's got the size, he's got the really clean pass sets and pass protection, and the profile is conducive to people moving in the run game too. So another guy that I like a lot.
All right. That's a hell of a breakdown. I do want people to focus on Blake Miller. Remember, the Eagles are moving away from Jeff Stoutland. They're going to more of a wide zone stretch scheme. So, C gap to C gap, you're saying keep an eye on that kid, because I think he might be a fit for the new Eagles philosophy, at least projected. We talked about tight end a little bit, and we're going heavy offense because the Eagles haven't drafted offense in a long time. So everybody thinks they're going to go offense. So we'll put Sadiq aside. They got to rebuild. If they don't get Dallas Goedert back, they have to rebuild the entire tight end room. So I want 2 things from you, and I want the best sort of dual move, modern move tight ends in this draft after Sadiq. And then I want just the true Y back, the inline guy who can block, because they need somebody who can set the edge.
For sure. And my philosophy, my grading scale, I changed it this year at the tight end position. I heavily inflated the blocking score, right? Because I think blocking and your ability to block in line, like you said, can dictate which personnel packages you can be utilized in, right? Yeah. But that said, if you need a flanker, if you need a really good receiving threat, you got to look at Eli Stowers. I think, jumping a 45-inch vertical at the NFL Combine at his side, just insane. He
had a bigger relative athletic score, than Sadiq. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. And it's really representative of the fact, like, in the receiving phase, this dude is explosive, and it shows on film too. Really easy accelerator, glider up seams, and he's got pretty good redirection ability and angle freedom on cuts too. His yard per route run figure, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it was better than a lot of receivers in this class. So looking at his pure efficiency as a receiving threat, both, being able to separate and splice through zones with that explosive athleticism and long speed, but then also being able to box guys out and make plays at the catch point with that taller, leaner frame. All of those things show up with him on film. And I think, it absolutely comes at the cost. There's a trade-off for the blocking ability. Eli Stowers was drastically underutilized as a blocker. And I think because of that, when he is on the field and blocking reps, it's predominantly, out in the slot as a big slot. You barely see any inline reps with him or working on the move off motions too. But even then, there's not a lot of power generation. There's not a lot of proper leveraging or drive. So you really are working from the ground up in terms of blocking. But if you're willing to accept that trade-off, he's a really good receiving threat with that, again, elite explosive upside. And I think he can be an X factor. I look at Aronde Gatson II, who was really productive as a rookie for the Chargers, in mainly in that flanker role, where he was working mostly in space as kind of a big slot weapon. That's probably the vision that you're going to have for Stowers too, right? I think Michael Trigg from Baylor is another one who kind of fits that mold. Trigg is a lot longer. He measured in with over 34-inch arms. I don't think he's quite the athlete that Stowers is from a functional sense. So again, Trigg he's explosive up seams, but he's not quite as quick-footed. He's not quite as good on direction changes. But again, you are working with a guy who's athletic enough to, again, get up seams, box guys out, and then the 34-inch arms really help with the catch radius, the playmaking ability. He's got some crazy catches on tape. I think Stowers within the receiving tight end mold is probably a little bit more translatable, but those are 2 as the pure receiving threats. Now, as the Y who can play play inline, some of the more complete players in the class, I'll throw Jaelan Bentley from Utah in that conversation. And he tested very well from the Utes. I think it was around 6'4", mid 250s. His playing weight is probably 260, over 33-inch arms. Ran a low 4.6, had a 35-inch vertical. And on film, this is a guy, and I think he tested fairly well in the agilities in the shuttle as well. But on film, Jaelan Bentley, and I think he gets really overlooked in this tight end class. You don't hear a ton of people talking about him, but his play style is very, very complete in both phases of the game. As a route runner, I think he's one of the best at cutting tight angles, and he's got a true route tree. I mean, this is not a guy who's just running, seam routes, right? He can run in breakers and digs and slants, and he's got some corner routes in his arsenal too, right? And he can get out in the flats and make himself available for run after catch with that rumbling explosion. But then as a blocker too, he's well leveraged. He can get under guys in the pad level battle, and he can drive through with that lower body action. So just so many things, so many boxes that Jaelan Bentley checks. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's my tight end 3 right now. Oscar Delp from Georgia is another one within that conversation. And actually a really interesting tidbit that came out at the combine. I believe he was playing it was a foot injury. It was maybe a bone fracture in his foot for most of the 2025 season. Yeah. And you watch him on film, he's one of the most explosive athletes in this tight end class, even with that. So, toughness, right? Grit, but also just a really good seam stretcher, really good athlete. There is some inconsistency with the hands at the catch point sometimes, but again, I think the body control is definitely there. I think the catch point composure, the ability to make high difficulty adjustments, right, and box guys out is there. He's got the run after catch ability with that combined explosion and that forward churning contact balance. And then he's also one of the best blockers in the class. You can play him in line, you can play him out wide if you need him to. He's, again, for a guy who's 6'5", really good at acquiring leverage, getting his base beneath him, and kind of weaponizing that explosive energy to just really reset the contact point. And then even as a pass protector, there were reps where Georgia was passing the ball, but they couldn't pass up Delp's value as a pass protector. So they just left him in as a 6th offensive lineman, and he would go to work. So again, I think the 2-phase value with Jaelan Bentley, with Oscar Delp is there. I'll throw in Eli Raridan from Notre Dame, another really good player, not quite as fluid, a little bit stiffer in the hips, a little bit more of your monolithic seam stretcher who's not going to be too, spry on redirections. But again, a guy who can make body control adjustments, who's a really good blocker at the point of attack, and has the length that you want to forklift guys out of gaps too. So the list goes on. There's a few others. Justin Joly is an intriguing receiving option as well. And I think Joly, if you're looking for a guy who gives good receiving value, but also at least makes a good effort as a blocker, I think he's better as a blocker than Stowers and Trigg. But also I think Joly isn't quite as explosive or fluid, right? So there's trade-offs everywhere you go. But I think this tight end class is really strong. And you go down the list too. There were some guys who tested really well. Matthew Hibner from SMU. If you're looking for more of a receiving threat, he was standing out at the Senior Bowl and then tested very well at the NFL Combine. So you have depth. You have layers of options in this class. If you can't get a guy in round 2 or 3, day 3, there might still be options for you there. So it's going to be exciting to see. I think the Eagles could be, well versed to double dip if they wanted to, because there is a lot of talent available.
Yeah, it seems like it. Ian, one position, we talked a lot of offense there. Last one for me here. The one thing that I think could happen here that could flip the Eagles' draft plans on their head would be if somebody gives Jaelan Phillips massive money in free agency. And then I think that edge rusher spot comes into play, maybe even as their number 1 overall pick at 23 overall. Just your quick thought on the edge rusher class and who could be the value there at 23 overall. Because I do think that's the thing. If Phillips is gone, I think that throws the Eagles' draft plans on their head, and they could end up with another defensive pick in round 1. What do you see at that spot?
Yeah, round 1, it's really interesting, right? Because you've got David Bailey, you've got Arvell Reese, you've got Ruben Bain. We can basically assume that none of those guys are going to be there at 23, right? I think the next guy up is Keldrick Falk, right? I don't know if he's a schematic fit for Vic Fangio, who likes to use guys from wider alignments. I think Keldrick Falk definitely has the build-up acceleration and the power profile if you want to use him there. But I've been looking at him more as kind of an even front defensive end who could rotate inside the 3-tech and 4-eye in a John Franklin Myers role potentially, right? So I don't know if he's that fit from the outside perspective, right? But if they have the vision for him, they could. I don't know if he's a perfect fit. Akeem Mesidor from Miami is one that could be a really good fit if you're willing to look past the age. He's going to be a 25-year-old rookie, but I think for the Eagles in particular, who are trying to extend this immediate contention window, right? Akeem Mesidor is a player who I think fits that to a T. Right away, he's going to give you a pass rush catalyst. His arms are a little bit under 33 inches, but he's still a really explosive player with good finesse and lateral agility and compact power for his size. The pass rush arsenal is there, and he's a really quality and operationally sound, technically sound, high motor run defender too. So the floor is extremely high with Akeem Mesidor. The age is a concern, but if the Eagles are willing to look past that, immediate contributor off the edge who allows you to not think about that for a little bit. I think TJ Parker is an intriguing player, more of an early round 2 guy for me. So it would be a reach in round 1. I don't think he's an elite physical talent. I think the combine showed that, but again, kind of a well-rounded, well-leveraged player with good compact mass, good proportional length. And, again, he's not going to be elite in any area. His pass rush bag can be a little inconsistent, but it's definitely there. We've seen him win with forklift swims, with power, with bull rushes, with club rips, right? So he's got all of that, but the consistency is still coming along. The last one that I'll bring up is Malachi Lawrence from UCF. And the round 1 was not a conversation for him before the combine. I still think he's probably more of a round 2 guy, but the way that he tested, I think it was a low 4.5 40-yard dash, over 40-inch vertical at around 6'4", over 250 with over 33-inch arms. He's got all of the physical components that you would want. He was one of the best edge rushers at the Shrine Bowl, showing off that lateral explosion and that ability to offset and then capitalize with that quick acceleration upfield. And then even though he doesn't consistently channel the power that you would expect with his length and mass, that those components are there. And then he's explosive, agile. He's got a working pass rush arsenal, right? And I think he's trending up as a run defender. I think he can get moved off his spot a little bit too easily. But again, you're banking on that pass rush upside to carry you from wider alignments there. So I think those are the names that come off the board for the Eagles. They'll have options, but it's going to be tricky when those top guys are already gone.
All right, Ian Cummings, one of the best in the business. If you heard that, delivers again. Make sure you follow him on X at IC_draft. He's the guy in charge of the Pro Football Network mock draft simulator. So go over there, profootballnetwork.com/mock draft. Also, one of the guys, I don't say this often, but Ian's one of the only guys in the world that's got a bigger vocabulary than me. So I got a big ego, but he's got a bigger vocabulary. But we're going to tap into you again, Ian. I always love talking to you. One of the best in the business when it comes to the NFL draft. And keep an eye because I'm going to be texting you. We need more of your expertise.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Ian. There's Ian Cummings joining us right here on Birds 365. Great show there from Ian. Appreciate all that draft breakdown. John, we didn't even get to the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, I know.
I was going to go there, but I decided to go edge just because I thought, it's more likely that Phillips walks and AJ's traded at this point. So let me go to edge. But we'll get Ian back on. Man, he knows how to break down a freaking draft board, doesn't he, Johnny Mac?
Dude's unbelievable, man. And, I called him one of the best in the business. He's just, when it comes to his level of knowledge of different prospects, I don't know if anybody beats it. Sometimes, and you're going down the draft like that tight end I never heard of. The guy, when he was talking about the blocking tight end and I got to go back and listen to. He's not even on the board of many people.
Right.
And, to talk about a position in that kind of depth, it's rare. There's a lot of draft people around there, but he's one of the best.
He really is. No doubt about it. I like your quip too, that he's got the better vocab. I don't know, John. I have a hard time believing that, as good as Ian is, that he tops the vocabulary of one John McMullen.
Well, you heard it, man. You heard it. He's when it comes to the NFL draft, and everybody loves mock drafts, and they do. Pro Football Network, as I said, .com/mock draft. They have the best simulator. So if you want to do your mock drafts, go over there. And we'll have them on hopefully a couple of times before the draft because nobody does it better than him.
Yeah, agreed. I'd like to try and get him on again, maybe weekly. We got about 6 weeks, maybe every other week or something like that. We'll reach out to Ian and see what he can do. Great show there today, Johnny Mac. John, it's good to have a full show here where we got into what's coming in free agency next week. We had a great draft breakdown. today, and still feels like there's a lot is going to change in the next 2 weeks, even with this Eagles team before the draft. So we'll really start to get a feel for, what direction this team is going. And maybe even next time we talk to Ian, we'll have more clarity on,
Oh, we definitely will.
I feel like you're going to really learn some things here in these next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to hone in on what the most important topics are.
Yeah, we definitely will. Because to your point about the edge rushers, they're not even in the conversation unless the Eagles can't bring back Jaelan Phillips, and then you don't start. Not saying you start talking about them on day 3, but they're not.
Do you agree with my assessment though? If Phillips walked, and that would be the one thing that could turn their draft plans on their head in terms of their first round pick.
Well, it definitely adds edge into the equation. It's not going to, it's not going to be edge.
Yeah, the board's got to fall. Yeah, we know that. So
it's not going to be edge or bust. But it definitely changed. Yeah, completely. If they have Jaelan Phillips, they're not edges out of the equation. If until day 3. If they don't have them, it's in the equation, round 1. And you'll see that amp up, I think, by the Eagles, whether it's top 30 visits or pro day news, they'll start honing in more on the edge rushers to get a better feel of, if anybody deserves to be in that spot. The good thing is, though, I do think it's a good year for the tackles, and I think that's still the heavy favorite. And man, I'm starting to load in on Blake Miller, which I know won't excite people, but
I like him. I've been looking into him. You mentioned him a bunch last week, John. Even 2 weeks ago, you were mentioning the name, and now I feel like it's starting to be mentioned a lot more. And you're right, from the schematic shift of the offense, it does. The fit makes a whole lot of sense with Blake Miller. I just don't know if the value is right at 23. That's not for me to decide, but that's the question I'd have.
Yeah, well, and the same thing, it depends. Like Monroe Freeling was the other guy, because I think they're shifting a little bit more towards the athleticism. And now, because of how well he tested at the combine, as Ian mentioned, I don't even think he's going to be there at 23. So change. And I also mentioned yesterday, I was interested why all of a sudden you see Spencer Fano started dropping a little bit. And, he gave you the answer, the short arms. But that's really important for NFL teams. So maybe all of a sudden a guy early in the process, most people had in the top 10. Well, he's probably not going to go in the top 10 now. So, he might fall and he might be in the equation. So a lot of movement, a lot of change when you see some of these testing numbers. And it was a good point also by Ian. They every single position set a record except for one for being the fastest position in combine history. Every single position.
To your point about how players are preparing for the combine, yeah. Right.
And Ian's point, if you're not going to test well, a lot of guys don't work out because they know they're not going to test well, and they go to do it at their pro days where at least they're going to have a little bit of
control,
shall we say, nudging of the numbers.
Right.
Penn State is famous for their nudging of the numbers.
The Penn State nudging of the numbers. That's funny.
So yeah, that was a good point by Ian as well. That's one of the reasons, as well as guys are specifically training, but guys who know they're fast, like Jeremiah Love, like everybody's like, well, watch this guy. He's going to test well. And those guys tested well. Kenyon Sadiq, obviously out of the world. But everybody knew he's going to test well. So part of the context of why that's going on. And I thought Ian brought some good information to that as well.
No doubt about it. John, one more super chat here we'll get to. Pumper just sends it in. What's up, Pump? Appreciate it, man. Good to hear from you, Pump. It's been a bit, he says. Y'all still drafting Bane with them 30-inch arms? Hell no, man. Brother, I don't care about the production. And Pumper checking it.
Yeah, I mean, that's, he's got short arms, and that generally does not bode well for edge rushers in the NFL. Maybe he's got to move inside. Maybe he's got to be more of a 3 technique. Just use his explosion. inside. But, you know, he's a good player, and he might be the kind of guy that can overcome the physical limitations, but not in the realm for the Eagles. He's not going to fall to 23. So he might fall a little bit, but I find it very hard to believe he'll be out of the top 10. There's not enough big time prospects in this draft.
Yeah, agreed. We'll see what ends up happening. All right, John, your final thoughts here today on a Tuesday edition of Birds 365, my friend.
Yeah, good draft talk. I like the bell curve analogy. It's deep in the middle.
Right.
So maybe not the greatest at the top. Interesting. You said about 24, 25 first round grades. So the Eagles are right there on the cusp of getting a real first round selection if things break the right way and they make the right decision. Again, nobody's got a lot of blue chips. Ian didn't like, I have two, Jeremiah Love and Caleb Downs. He mentioned two, Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles, both from Ohio State. But he said Love was top 10. So I don't think he has Love in that category, which I'll happily disagree with. But the point is there's not a lot of really, really blue chip players in this draft.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. John, great show today, my man. We will talk to you tomorrow on a Wednesday edition, I think, which marks the return of
Mike Gill by the way, Mike Gill's one of the luckiest people on the planet because he got out of the Middle East. I mean, the timing did not work out for him.
John, this is why I don't have much interest in traveling to the Middle East, man. I'm good. I'm good in America for now, okay? I don't know, man. That's scary shit.
That is scary shit. So we'll talk to Mike about that a little bit tomorrow. He's back from Egypt and Jordan just in time. Just got out in time.
He got his Pizza Hut and he got out of Dodge.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that.
John, good show, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow, right, brother?
All right. See y'all.
All right, thanks, John. There's Johnny Mac, John McMullen. Follow him at JF McMullen, the #1 Eagles beat reporter in town. Appreciate him.